You're watching Scriptease. In today's episode, we'll be finishing our discussion on the screenwriting of Frank Darabont by covering one of his darker films, The Mist. You can expect spoilers for the whole film, so I suggest watching it before watching this video. Last episode, I covered Darabont's best-known film, the critically acclaimed The Shawshank Redemption, and demonstrated how Darabont used the characters of Andy, Red, and Brooks to skillfully explore his key theme, hope. If Shawshank is about hope, The Mist is about despair. The Mist follows a group of people trapped in a supermarket by an all-encompassing, mysterious mist. It doesn't take long for panic to set in, divisions to rise, and for the ensemble cast to turn on each other. The Mist was released 6 years after Darabont's last film, The Majestic. Coming off the back of 3 uplifting films, The Mist seemed like a drastic shift in Darabont's filmmaking to most viewers. But as we know, Darabont started in horror, and he was eager to return to his old genre stomping grounds. Studios were less certain, however. How could they justify giving Darabont a large budget for a film with such a dark tone? And not to mention the ending, which was flat out depressing, even if it did imbue the film with a certain nihilistic millennial appeal. We'll discuss the ending later, but for now, suffice to say that if Darabont wanted to make this film, he needed to do so on a low budget, another trademark of the horror genre.
I said, Steve, you know, it's the climate of this town right now is not such that we're going to get away with doing Night of the Living Dead today with a real kick you in the nuts kind of ending, and unless we do it really cheaply.
Right.
And he said, well, you know, I know we all had a deal, terms that provide money up front for us. If you're cutting your fee, I'll eliminate mine altogether. And
Wow.
He said, you've been wanting to tell this story for, 17 years or almost 20 years. And if all you're going to have to make it is $17 million, go out and make the best $17 million movie you can.
With a budget of just $18 million, Darabont executed on his vision for yet another short story by Stephen King. The movie had a lukewarm reception, making only $8 million on its opening weekend, but gaining more traction in the international markets. The film polarized critics, being panned by local audiences as excessively dark. But like Shawshank, the film has amassed popularity over time, and now boasts a healthy cult following. Like Shawshank, the beauty of The Mist lies in the clarity of the themes explored in the script. The reader is presented with a fully realized hypothetical situation that manages to maintain realism in the face of an otherworldly threat by taking us inside the panicked minds of the supermarket's occupants. Each person serves as a different answer to the question, are humans fundamentally good? And the supernatural forces pressing down on the supermarket act as a pressure cooker, drawing out the true nature of the survivors.
It's not about the monster in the closet. It's about the people who own the house where the monster is in the closet.
Some characters crumble, like Jim, whose mind is twisted after encountering the creatures from within the mist, whilst others rise to the occasion, like Ollie, who finds bravery thanks to his sharpshooting skills. The threat posed to the characters comes in 2 forms, external and internal. The external threat is the amorphous dread of the mist, whilst the internal threat is the paranoia of the other survivors. Much like The Mist, this paranoia is intangible and not easily grasped or understood. It's a haze of confusion and doubt, and without a foreseeable solution, that doubt very quickly sours into despair. Let's start by addressing the external threat, The Mist. Now, I'm not going to try and claim that The Mist isn't actually dangerous, it clearly is. It's that The Mist's more important role is as an unknowable fear. We don't know where it came from, we don't know what its purpose is, we don't know its shape, and worst of all, we don't know when it will end. As H.P. Lovecraft said, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. The survivors are under attack by fear itself. This is channeled into physical form using prehistoric-looking creatures that seem designed to kill. Rudimentary beings with claws and stingers, tentacles lined with sharp teeth, behemoths that crush with every step, and the worst of them all, spiders. These primordial forms harken back to a time before society. They target our most primal fears. They plunge the survivors back into the food chain with only mop handles for defense. Humans survived because we're social animals who work together to overcome our fears. But what happens when we turn on each other? When we betray that advantage? As Ollie puts it,
As a species, we're fundamentally insane. more than 2 of us in a room, we pick sides and start dreaming up reasons to kill one another. Why do you think we invented politics and religion?
Darabont explores the corruption of these two tenets which humans have historically used to band together: religion and politics. Mrs. Carmody is a God-fearing prophet of doom who views the mist as the end times, as punishment for the hubris of modern-day people. Her explanation, though completely unfounded, gives answers to the terrified masses, answers that they desperately need to maintain their sanity. Of course, the irony here is that Mrs. Carmody's ramblings are a delusion in themselves, that her followers buy into for comfort, and in doing so, their fears precipitate into illogical actions. They demand blood sacrifices to appease the beast within the mist. They lynch Private Jessup for being remotely involved in the cause of the mist, and they eventually try to kill Billy, a completely innocent 5-year-old. I'm not trying to say religion is evil, I'm not even sure that Darabont is trying to say that, but certainly the story shows us that bonding over paranoia only breeds more paranoia. Read Lord of the Flies if you're interested in that idea. Politics is represented by Brent Norton, a lawyer who believes in logic, pre-established rules. These rules are inflexible, however. When confronted with something beyond their explanation, the impulse is to deny its existence. We can think of Norton's ideals more broadly as those of science: observation, logic, deduction. This apocalypse doesn't fit into his known world, and so he rejects it. Norton is forced to confront the danger to disprove the others, and his stubborn refusal to believe gets him killed. Following the death of Norton's group, the death of reason, the supermarket accelerates its descent into madness. The night comes and brings with it a string of deaths that lend credence to Mrs. Carmody's sermons. Light attracts the beasts, and so the supermarket is dropped into darkness, removing yet another modern comfort. People huddle in the dark, lit only by tea candles, like our ancestors in their caves, just trying to get through the night. Exhausted, dazed with disbelief, etched with despair. Fear has broken down the fragile illusion of society.
I can't accept that. People are basically good, decent. My God, David, we're a civilized society.
Sure, as long as the machines are working and you can dial 911, but you take those things away, you throw people in the dark, you scare the shit out of them. No more rules. You'll see how primitive they get.
You scare people badly enough, you can get them to do anything.
And then we have the ending. Oh, good lord, the ending. It is dark, bleak, grim. Despite all of David's attempts to help people, to survive, to save his son, he reaches the end of the road. Out of gas, trapped in the mist, he resorts to the only mercy he has: the revolver. With only 4 bullets left and 5 survivors, David remains selfless to the end. He kills the others, even his own son, leaving him a broken man with nothing else in the world. He lets out a howl of soul-rending anguish and despair, dissolving into shuddering sobs of grief as he rocks back and forth like a man in an asylum. David is a good man. We see consistently throughout the script that he puts the well-being of others before himself. He raids the pharmacy to help find meds for Joe's burns, despite putting himself at risk. He tries to defend Jessup from Mrs. Carmody's mob, only being held back by the others of his group. In fact, you could almost say that David is faultless. Unfortunately, in the world of the mist, this selflessness is punished by the brutality of the situation. Even as David prepares to die, his last chance to escape this living hell is taken. In a cruel twist of fate, the army arrives to save the town. David's efforts are punished till the last. David keeps screaming, and screaming, and screaming, and screaming. David will never stop. Now, if you watch that ending and still think the movie isn't about despair, then you probably need to get your head checked, because you're even nuttier than Mrs. Carmody. But how does Darabont achieve this oppressive feeling of confusion, paranoia, and dread?
You made the film take a very dark turn.
180-degree dark turn.
Very grim ending, very un-Hollywood ending.
Yeah. And some people really hate it.
Oh, it infuriated people, and yet Steve King said...
Steve King dug it.
He said if he had thought of it, he would have ended his story that way.
Yeah.
A lot of the work is carried by his diction. As discussed previously, diction is great at signaling genre, and as a horror movie, The Mist is rife with it. There are far too many examples to cover here. You really should read the script for a masterclass in word choice, but I'd like to indulge and share some of my favorites. Darabont describes The Mist as glowing dead white, a sinister beat right off the bat. In the script, Mrs. Carmody wears a canary yellow pantsuit, calling forth the imagery of the canary in the mine, whose role is to warn of coming danger, much like Mrs. Carmody does with her portents of doom. As the people in the supermarket take notice of the mist, the checkout lines dissolve as curiosity crystallizes towards concern, a perfect image of their mindset, plus a great bit of alliteration. After escaping the market and driving to their death, David's group passes over broken sections of pavement, past slabs of tarmac standing up like tombstones. And there's my personal favorite line. The sodium vapor lamps in the parking lot look like eerie, distant planets in the gloom. What they once knew has taken on a disconcerting alien quality. Earth as they know it is gone, and they are left with the cosmic Lovecraftian horrors of the mist. Darabont also uses diction to create symbolism, with the idea of spiders. He creates this link in the first act, when Billy innocently says, "Ask Mummy if she wants a Spider-Man comic book. I bet she does." Later, before raiding the pharmacy, David says he'll bring Billy back the Spider-Man comic book. And of course, what does David find when he enters the pharmacy? This silken lair of a horde of spiders with faces that are vaguely suggestive of a human's. Finally, we have the ultimate irony. As David returns home to see if his wife is still alive, he finds her dead, the entire house festooned with spider webs. Little running themes like this make a story feel more cohesive and deliberate. Darabont masterfully weaves descriptive asides into his screenplay. Common screenwriting knowledge holds that you should only write what the audience can see or hear, but of course this isn't a hard and fast rule. Writing what the audience can't see can be useful, as long as it isn't overused. In the scene where Private Jessup is lynched, Darabont reinforces the turn in Mrs. Carmody's followers. The soldier is pleading for his life, even as he gets brutalized by little old ladies and the guy who works at the gas station, by people who have been friends and neighbors, by people now turned savage killers. This momentary aside from the action reminds us that these were harmless civilians, ordinary people, and that anyone can be turned by fear, controlled by despair. The introduction to the shopping center shares another aside that foreshadows the coming danger. Store activity, people shopping, maneuvering the aisles, trying not to bump carts, cashiers working. It's all very normal, and yet its very normalcy should unnerve us. This is very much in the tone of how it's shot. From a less experienced writer, this may seem rough or clumsy, but Darabont carefully places this description here, knowing that there's no other way to get across this point. He knows that he must clearly communicate the mundaneness of the shopping center, this nexus of society, so that it juxtaposes the forthcoming panicked actions of the inhabitants, the breakdown of order. Put more succinctly, it's the calm before the storm. Darabont once again calls the camera movement here. We discussed with Shawshank how Darabont doesn't shy away from using camera directions in his scripts to evoke emotion. Darabont shows how camera movements aren't just for wresting control from the director. Following the tentacle incident in the loading dock, the survivors start boarding up the supermarket's windows against the horrors outside. But the camera movements suggest the mist has already worked its way inside, affecting their minds. A drifting shot moves us through the mist, almost point of view in nature, then follows seamlessly into the supermarket, where it drifts and probes around the hive of activity. The camera has personality. It breathes life into the situation and presents the assembly of fortifications as a rushed endeavor rather than a well-executed movement. So what's the net effect of all this despair? Is Darabont telling us that he doesn't believe in hope anymore? Where have his messages about the power of the human spirit gone? Perhaps he's simply changed his mind on the matter. In The Mist, Darabont certainly takes a couple of shots at the naivety of his previous ideas. He gives an elbow to the poster for The Shawshank Redemption when David, a movie poster artist, says,
"You kidding? They could whip up some bad Photoshop poster in an afternoon. They do it all the time. Two big heads."
Remind you of anything? Irene's speech about the government funding bombs rather than education not only takes a jab at the establishment, but is also sidelined in favor of the MP's arrival and David and Amanda nervously catching each other's gaze. It's as if to say no one cares, or maybe he just feels like no one seems to care anymore.
Sometimes movies do have to take a chance and piss you off and hold up a mirror to the audience that isn't the flattering one. Mm-hmm. You know, and at that point I was, and I still am, you know, the events of the 21st century have not been to my liking, you know. The gentler, more optimistic kid, you know, who made Shawshank, is now, I try not to let go of my optimism, but I'm a crabby old bastard now, I see the game being rigged and re-rigged and re-rigged so many times, and as you go through life, you go, well, if the game is nothing but rigged, if we're going to continue to make the same stupid mistakes, then what the hell value is there in our species?
I personally think that Darabont still believes in the power of the individual to change their circumstances. He still believes that people are essentially good. He still believes in the values of heroism.
The notion that one can become a hero in one's own life.
One can rise to the occasion
and exceed the challenges as they are presented, even though they might be enormous, great challenges. And that's something else I very much believe in. And clearly, this one sort of thematic element keeps coming up in my work again and again.
The Mist isn't meant to undermine this idea. It's to show that sometimes the demons we have to face are too great, too innumerable, too domineering to overcome. But we can still try to be better, try to overcome our human flaws, our society's flaws, our world's flaws. And it's in trying that we access the possibility of becoming great. I'd like to leave you with Darabont reading a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that he carries around in his wallet, a quote which I believe drives all of his best films.
If you carry around a quote in your wallet, it says something about you, sir.
Well, this was not planned.
Right.
I
absolutely.
happen to carry this in my wallet at all times because I believe so strongly in the incredibly articulate sentiment of this. Teddy Roosevelt said, "It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled. Credit belongs to the man who really was in the arena, his face marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs to come short and short again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. It is the man who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasm and knows the great devotion, who spends himself on a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of great achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and cruel souls who know neither victory nor defeat."
For all of you screenwriters out there, dare to achieve. Good writing and good luck.